Hi, everyone. I am Heather, and I want to welcome you to Magnificent Authors Podcast, brought to you by Magnificent Mamas. This is the show where we'll celebrate the magic of storytelling and the power of words. I'm your host, Heather, and each week I'll be sitting down with incredible authors from all walks of life to explore their creative journeys, uncover their writing secrets, and delve into worlds they create. Whether you are an aspiring writer, a passionate reader, or simply curious about the minds behind your favorite books, this is the podcast for you. So grab a cozy blanket, pour yourself a cup of tea, and get ready to be inspired by the magnificent authors who join us. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. I am Heather with Magnificent Mamas and Magnificent Authors Podcast. We're joined here today with author DC Gomez. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, thank you so much for having me, Miss Heather. It's a pleasure being here. Hi, everyone. I'm DC Gomez. I'm a multi-genre author. I do a lot of everything from urban fantasy to children's books. And I tend to play in different fields as well as fiction and nonfiction. So I do a little bit of everything.
Okay. Wow. That's awesome. Not the intro I was expecting at all, but love it. So what genres do you typically prefer to write in?
It depends on the mood. I can totally be honest with that. I enjoy urban fantasy, but it's also the one I prefer to read myself. I have a blast. I've been known to do everything from devotionals to children's books to dark humor. So I do a little bit in it. So it depends on the story. I've been very blessed to just kind of go from there, depending on what the story is driven to. I can kind of play in that field.
That is awesome. That is so cool. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your books?
So I'm trying to see which books should we talk about. So
that is totally up to you, my dear.
Okay, so let's talk my urban fantasy series for anybody. I think that's what most people know me, is one of my longest. I have a series that takes place in Texas for anybody who's in Texas and loves small town. The Intern Diaries is a full series. It's 5 novels, 3 novellas, and it's based on the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. So the question that I asked everybody, what would you do if death knocks at your door with a job offer? Will you take it? Because that's kind of the premise of my series. I have a young lady who moves to Texas, and she has accidentally kills Death's old intern, which is going to put it that. It was an accident. Didn't mean it. But now she has the job of being Death's North American intern. So you have these adventures of like, should she take the job? Should she not do it? We have a talking cat, a boy genius. We have kidnapping, shenanigans, mayhem, and a whole bunch of madness taking place. And of course, because it's, the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, you get to meet a horseman every book. And, Judgment Day, it's what if the apocalypse happened? How would it happen? So we have a almost apocalyptic world, which it was really exciting when I planned this series, and then COVID happened. So if you ever tried to release a book called Judgment Day when the world shuts down for a pandemic, not the best marketing campaign. So it became quite interesting because I literally like Judgment Day is coming, and I had to put in parentheses like the book. I was like, you got to be kidding me. So had a blast. Yes.
I was gonna say that's wild. That's so wild to think of that happening at that time while you're in the midst of writing the book. It's just comical almost.
The world shut down March 13. The book came out March 27. And literally, I'm in the middle of campaigning. Everybody knows I got pre-orders, and people like, what just happened? And there's a lot of things that it is, the book has plagues going on because it's a 4 Horsemen. We got killer bees, which Texas was hit by a plague of those. Well, everything was happening. People's like, what is happening? I was like, I don't know, but why is my book being plagued with this? So it's a great story now. It wasn't then, because I'm like, great. This is perfect timing. I should have had something that didn't have this title in it. So for anybody who enjoys urban fantasy, that is a fun series. It's super action-packed. For anybody who enjoys romance, unfortunately, I'm not the romance author. So I tend to kind of like bear people in different directions. I did have an attempt at romance. I went to a convention and came back. I was like, I should write romance. I mean, everybody has a romance book. I should commit myself to it. So my attempt at it is the cat lady special. So I have a depressed cat lady turns arms dealer, and
Nice.
everybody goes, it's super fun, but not a romance. And everybody's like, that's not what we thought. I was like, yeah, it has a lot of self-love, a lot of coming to terms with yourself, just not what people were expecting of romance. So I'm learning some lessons. Like maybe that's not the genre for me.
I mean, we all have that. We all have genres that we're not good at. I love to read horror, but I don't think I could ever write horror. Like, give me a good slasher or gruesome story any day, and I'm good. Could never write it. Sci-fi, fantasy, all day long. That is my life. I love sci-fi and fantasy. So, but see, the way I feel about fantasy is you can easily add those little tidbits of like romance or something in there. I feel like it kind of covers, especially depending on the author and how they write it, it can cover a lot of different subgenres. And I think that's one of the things I enjoy about fantasy so much.
You can add a love story into any plot, but to make it a very straightforward romance, there's certain things that you have to have that I don't seem to nail down just because there's too much stuff blowing up in my books for the most part. So
you mean like the closed door graphic type of stuff?
I'm trying to add some spice into my life. I have a spicy retelling that's supposed to be coming out this year as part of the Cursed by series that there's about, I think, 12 of us working on it. So I have a spicy retelling of Little Red Riding Hood.
Oh,
and
wow.
What if Little Red Riding Hood was not the innocent one in the bunch? Like, what exactly would happen? So this one's coming out. It should be pretty fun. But it's one of those, like, yeah, it comes with spice. I don't know if I can make it a romance. So there's certain tropes that comes in a romance that people are expecting. So I will hate for readers to have an expectations of certain things in there and then be like, that doesn't have it. I'm like, yeah, we're working on that.
I think they can be the hardest readers to please because they're looking, like you said, for specific stuff. And I don't know, for me, like, romance can be great. Don't get me wrong. So nobody take offense to what I'm about to say. But, like, I don't need a whole in-depth, chapter on them getting busy, to put it nicely. Like, can we just get back to the story of whatever is going on and skip the whole scene?
I can kind of deal with that. I'm very much into the whole they get together, then they break up and get back together is the part that drives me nuts. I'm like, why can't you just stay together? Like, why does this have to have the roller coaster of emotions? Why does that? So I think as a reader of not romances, it's not my genre. So I tend to take it very easy. I love the romantical elements. I like the tension that comes when people get together and trying to work that out. I just don't know if I have a whole book that I can make. Like, that's 2 chapters for me. I'm like, I can work this in 2 chapters.
I definitely couldn't do a whole book on romance.
I have amazing friends who do incredible romance and I'm jealous because I'm like, that's amazing. I'm probably going to be blowing some stuff up. You know what I mean? I have some chase scenes. We have some action. So it all depends on what people enjoy to read. So I tend to kind of go a little dark humor more than anything.
Nice. So tell me about, is that your poster behind you to the, what would it be, your right side? The Urban Fantasy Adventures?
Yes. So I have right now working on book 3 of the Oldest Assassin. So Eric has a final chapter. So a side character from my intern diaries, which is Eric, a witch / cop before he became assassin per se, is trying to figure out who betrayed the Order of Witches. So he's been on a rampage. And it's been much more brutal than he expected. I think this is the book that has a little more spice and sass than anything else. And it's just the nature of, I think, what Eric is. This is, he's extremely sexy. He's extremely, comfortable with his own skin. And I don't think any of my other characters are. And as a male character, writing one like that was kind of fun because there's not, he understands how good he is in everything he does. And he's not apologetic. He's like 175 years old. He doesn't care. At this point in his life, he's just not concerned with that.
Not living that long.
He just doesn't care. So writing him and his perspective, but is bringing think this book, the first one is The Hitman. Second is a traitor, and the next one coming up will be The Ploy, writing from his perspective and his dual POV. So I have a witch and a shifter, and having those two kind of, they're not technically enemies, but they're definitely not friends. We're just going to put it at that. So there's a tension between, yeah, they're in between. They kind of have to work together, but their tension between them is great. The banter is really fun, and everybody's like, "Can we have them together?" I was like, "I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens."
Where they take it.
And that's kind of the part. It's like wherever they decide to go, wherever Eric thinks. But Eric does not have really good judgment in women. So we all have questions. We're like, Sasha, don't do it. He's just not good for you.
So you mentioned a shifter. What kind of shifter? Can you tell without giving the story spoilers away?
Ooh, it's a little bit complicated. So she is a shifter clan of assassins, if that makes any sense. You know, and they all have their preference of what they can shift into. So they were betrayed as well. So I have a whole bunch of betraying in my series. I don't know why. You would think I live a bad life, but it just seems to be like, no, not really. It's kind of the nature of our business of like, what if the people you love betray you? You know what I mean? Like, who do you trust? What if the enemy is actually your family? Do you cut them off? And at what point in time do you decide this is not working out for us?
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. Who would you say your favorite character is that you've wrote about so far?
Believe it or not, probably Constantine. I have a talking cat who happens to be everybody's favorite. And I've had a little figurine running around this office at one point in time. So Constantine happens to be 5,000 years old. So he's kind of like the link between all of my series. So I have it's called the Reapers universe, and I decided anything that deals with urban fantasy is going to take place in the same universe. Primarily because trying to create magical rules for all this became more confusing than I thought. I was like, no, everything needs to be in the same bubble. So you have some characters that kind of rotate and visit throughout, but Constantine is kind of the essence behind just because he's 5,000 years old. So Constantine is typical cat. For anybody who owns a cat understands, they don't care. They're going to love you when they love you. Then when they're done, and they walk away.
And then they don't want to be loved on no more.
And they're done. And there's no conversations about it. So he tells you how it is. He doesn't care. I usually joke with people. I'm like, I have readers. Constantine has fans. And his fans send him mail. And I'm like, okay. So he's amazing. Like, he gets mail. I get letters to Constantine and his humans. I'm like, oh. So having to write about a cat who is literally has more money than God and can do anything is quite amazing.
That's awesome. That sounds so fun too. Who would you say is the hardest character you've had to write?
I think by far right now, Famine has been the hardest character to write because Famine does not comply. You know, it's the first time that I work on different pronouns. So Famine is they, them. So having to remember that pronoun as you're writing this character became very tricky because everybody's like, you keep trying to call him he or she. I was like, it's very much like death in the series is anything you imagine death is going to be. You know, if you think death is going to be the Grim Reaper, you think death is going to be a monster. For Isis, my main character, death is a beautiful woman that reminds her of her mother. You know, for others, you know, is different things. So death comes in whatever form. Famine refuses to take a form. Famine refuses to be identified and refuses to be played to those things of very human-like, you know, sex and gender. Famine is fairly androgynous. And famine is extremely moody. So, you know, I usually blame the apocalypse is going to happen because of famine. Like famine is going to have a fit and all hell's going to break loose and here we are. So writing a character that is very fluid and at the same time into their own world was very, while it was fun, it was hard because I had to make sure and create. I'm like, who are you as an essence and why? And it's just that very much. Famine's oblivious that the rest of the world knows that they're a horseman. Famine's convinced nobody can tell. Like everybody can tell. Everybody knows you're a horseman.
That's awesome. That sounds really fun. Just like, I know it's probably not supposed to, but like my dark twistedness, like it sounds like something I would definitely pick up and read for sure.
I think that's the best part. Is supposed to be fun. You know, I write very much escapism. Like, I want people to enjoy the story. I want you to get lost. If you're looking for a social commentary, you can find it. If not, you still can have an amazing adventure. I have readers all the way to 8th grade to, 80-year-olds reading these books. So
Oh,
there's
wow.
this, yes, it is a huge spectrum. Language fairly appropriate for a younger audience. So you don't feel too bad having, your middle schooler reading the book. I said 8th grade is usually it's just because of the themes. And they're okay.
So if my 15-year-old picked it up, it would be no issue.
No, so there is no graphic sex scenes. There is no, Isis can't date to save her life. Her first date, he ends up becoming a zombie. So we were not having a dating situation. Language is fairly appropriate. So I think there might be a few curse words here and there. I did have a parent that said in their household they don't use the word butt. And Isis described one as like sexy butt. So I was like, that comes with, I usually recommend parents to always read their stuff before their kids. I'm like, you can make a judgment call, and that would be the part. But depending on what it is. So it is fairly appropriate for ages, but you can have a blast. And as well as an adult, it's not going to feel like, okay, this is so YA. It is fairly in the middle of that road that you can enjoy the adventure. And depending if you enjoy fantasy and action, this is the series for you.
That's awesome. And I'm sorry, I'm so bad about saying awesome, but like, it really sounds awesome. And I love fantasy, so like I totally get it. So does your world take place like on Earth, like, or is it like a total separate planet?
This is all current Earth time. So it is definitely urban fantasy here in Texas, a small town. And I say small,
you mentioned the Texas part.
Yeah, it's I say small town. Texarkana is not that tiny compared to many cities in Texas, but it's not a metropolis. So the fun part about it is it takes you on a tour, I say Texarkana, but also it gives you a tour of many places around North America. So she does have a trip to New York City. She goes to San Diego. She goes to Kansas. So we're going throughout the country to these locations. So if you decided to Google, you're definitely going to find this on a map. If you find specific buildings, you can find them on a map. So it gives you a whole, yes, which is fun and exciting, but at the same time, you have to do research and make sure like that building's still there. So at the time when the books came out, the building was there. They might not be there anymore. I had a moment that I wrote a scene at Orlov Local Airport, and there was a house. I swear to God, there was a house. I think the book came out and I had the house exploding for some reason. And then, God forbid, there's no house anymore. I was like, God, what happened to this house? I swear there was a house there.
That is some wild luck you have with the way first COVID, then the house.
Yeah. So we tried to be very much aware that my life could happen. So I think there's very few locations that I had to create and invent because it didn't meet my story. So like there's a couple locations that if you go driving down that place, that building's not there. And that's okay. I'm like, it will be okay. Everything else you can find. I've had people that actually wrote Eric's story takes place in Salem. And one of my readers literally drove to Salem because they're in Boston. And they went down to this store because I got an email from the store and it's like Nook Tarn. It's a beautiful, quaint little shop in Salem. And they're like, I had a reader of yours come in because you're featuring us in a book. And I was like, yes, I did. Hopefully you guys don't mind. Like, no, we love it. But yeah, so things like that happen that people's like, I really want to go check out this place because you talked about it. It was like, it's horrible. Go check it out. So that's the best part.
It's so important to do your research, especially when you're, including real places, so if I was to write about somewhere in California, I've never been to California, so I would be completely screwed without doing research, to say the least. And you can definitely tell when people they know their stuff. Like you said,
Google Earth becomes your best friend, but you should also have like most of the places I've written, I've been there, I lived there, I traveled through there. So I have a really good idea of the layout, which is interesting because you talk about knowing my place. I have several people in Texarkana be like, so that street goes the other way. I was like, not if you go from this side of town. They're like, oh yeah, I forgot. I'm like, listen, I've driven around this, especially when I started writing. I was a crazy little girl driving around, taking pictures and going, if I turn on this street at 60 miles an hour, could I pull this U-turn and would the cop stop me? So I have driven around in circles trying to make sure that there's action scenes and chase scenes and car scenes and explosions that I think supposed to happen will actually fit within the content, parameters of like the city.
That's awesome. That would be so wild. I think a lot of readers just expect, the author to sit down and write the book and make places up and not actually do a lot of legwork like that. And maybe it's just the people that I've seen, but driving around and is more than just, it's research, obviously, but it's so much more because you're experiencing it. You're testing things out visually.
I have friends that have practiced fight scenes, which I think most authors, like, at least I know when I'm doing a fight scenes, I tend to write them in my house because I'm literally like throwing punches and like diving. I was like, if I fall this way, how would that look? Kind of creating an essence of what this book would feel like if you were watching it. But I'm very much aware that when I started writing the series, I needed to find locations. And it took me a couple of weeks of driving around my own town and looking at places and stopping and being like, if I put my office here, would this make sense? So the office for the Reapers takes place in the Nash Industrial Park, which is literally a strange little park place for business. And I put like this huge building in a corner, which happens to be, thank God for now, an empty lot. Might not be tomorrow. But having to find, diameters and how big this building is going to be, how the layout of this building is going to look, and why would it look a certain way from the outside, and build this creation because you want these buildings to feel real. You want people to read them and be like, okay, if I went down to Texas and hit, Highway 82, I will hit the Nash Business Park. And they, if I make this right, the Reapers would be in this corner. So I want people to actually, think about back when Anne Rice was doing Interview with a Vampire. How many people wanted to go to New Orleans and be like, is this really there? Oh, yeah. We all want to do these things. And that's the beautiful thing about urban fantasy is creating these places and bringing them to life that people want to take a trip down to Texas and be like, I want to go check out where Abuelitas could be and kind of having a blast about that.
I think, having the fantasy and the realistic locations, the places you can actually go and visit or see in person just brings that fantasy home even more. I think that would be like such an experience. Like I don't know. I'm using this for a reference because I remember when Twilight came out and how everyone, went to go the location and taking pictures. And it's like, that's kind of my go-to example for that, but it brings it to you,
she did urban fantasy. It is that concept of merging these two worlds and giving you that whole, you're not just reading and you're taking it outside the pages and you can immerse yourself in this world. And some people just want to walk in. I'm very much aware that I had one of my readers who is very much, I have an audiobook that's still within the concept of trying to get it. And she's like, I can't do your audiobooks anymore. I'm like, why? She's like, because I was driving to work and past my job because you said, turn right. I'm listening to you turning around in town. I'm like, oh no, please don't do that. And she was like, yeah, I was a little bit not where I was supposed to go because she works within the downtown area. She just kept driving downtown. I'm like, yeah. She goes, yeah, about 10 minutes later, I realized this is not where I'm supposed to go. I was like, yeah, no, don't do that. Don't do that.
No. Oh my goodness. That's wild.
So much fun.
Yeah, I would probably be one of those listening to an audiobook, and if there's like turn right, I'd probably be turning right. Like,
especially if you're driving the book in the town that is created, because you know exactly where you are, and you're in New Boston Road or whatever street you're in, and you're driving and says, hey, turn right. She's like, I'm turning around like I'm following the book. I was like, oh, that's funny. That's pretty funny.
It is. It's awesome. I could only imagine doing that in a town, driving around while listening to the book and experiencing. That would be like the coolest thing ever.
So much fun.
It sounds like it. So do you want to tell us anything else about your books?
I usually encourage for anybody who enjoys fantasy, check out the Intern Diaries. It's fun, it's lighthearted, it has all sorts of layers of madness. And if you don't like fantasy, check out the Cat Lady series. If you're open to, new adventures, if you're willing to listen to a new author that you've never heard before, I would love to have you guys. Absolutely. And if anybody's just not sure they want to commit, if you check out my website, which is dcgomez-author.com, you can actually download a short story. So that way you can download it for free, enjoy it in your favorite device, and decide if this is for you or not.
I am going to definitely have to do that.
Mm-hmm. And if you stay in the newsletter, you get 2 additional short stories within like a week or so. So yes, it's like 3 short stories people can pick up. And then you get to decide, I'm like, this is great, or this author's not for me. And that's okay too. We all have authors and styles that we enjoy.
Exactly. And I think most readers read what they will enjoy. Mm-hmm. Reviewers read and review typically what they would enjoy. Now, hopefully anyone reviewing your books are enjoying your books and leaving you all the positive that you deserve. So
hopefully they enjoy urban fantasy if that's what they're reading. That would be great. If not, I'm like, oh, this might not be for you. I have had people that says, I don't like fantasy. And I'll be like, do not pick up this series because it doesn't get better. It's just going to progressively get much more wild with magic. And they're like, ooh, I was like, yeah, this is not for you. So
I had a beta reader for one of my stories, and she was, talking about, well, I'm not really into fantasy. And I was like, okay, well, this isn't going to work. I write sci-fi fantasy. I have it in my post. Yeah. Sorry. Not going to work.
And that's okay. But it's also the fact that I want you to have a really enjoyable experience. And if this is not your style, this is not the genre, that's okay. I have other things, I usually kind of laugh, like, the people who follow my devotionals are not reading my urban fantasy.
Oh, yeah.
Or, I have people that pick up my children's books that are not going to pick up urban fantasy. It's all good. I don't like every book that I read. It will be okay. So it's just find something you enjoy and just get yourself lost in a book. It's amazing.
I love that piece of advice.
We have amazing books. But Miss Heather, it has been such a pleasure hanging out with you. I love it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us and letting us into your world a little bit and getting to know you as well as your books. The day this airs, we'll be featuring you on our Book of the Day section.
Okay.
On our blog and then on our social media. So everyone can check out where to get your books and connect with you. Everyone, make sure you check out her books. Her books sound amazing. I'm sure there's a little bit of something for everyone. And don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share. Thank you. And that's a wrap on another episode of Magnificent Authors Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure to share another inspiring conversation with a talented author. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to Magnificent Authors Podcast so you don't miss any of our upcoming conversations with amazing writers. And be sure to check out Magnificent Mamas on our website, which is www.magnificentmamas.us, or on our Facebook page for more inspiring content from incredible authors. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. What resonated with you the most? Head over to Facebook or leave a comment on our website and let me know. Until next time, keep reading, keep writing, and keep those imaginations soaring.